Hey guys, what's going on? It's Dan, and I am joined today by Ryan and Otto. How are you two doing?
Yeah,
I'm
doing well, man.
yeah, doing well. Ready to kind of get things going and moving into this league.
Yeah, fantastic. So, for those of you that might not know watching this, this is the Pokemon Draft Premier League, where we are the three admins for the league. It's an invite-only VGC style draft league that has some of the best draft league coaches from multiple leagues around the world. And our draft recently concluded, and we're just going to be going through the power rankings. The power rankings here are different than normal power rankings. This is my typical methodology for power rankings, which is coach and playstyle are not taken into consideration. If 100 equally skilled players were given each team and then asked to play against everyone else in a giant round robin, this is about what I would expect the final standings to be. And a higher ranking doesn't necessarily mean I believe that team would be favored over a lower rated one. For example, if team number 2 had a 60% favored over team number 1, but against the rest of the field, team number 1 had a 60% win rate and team number 2 had a 54% win rate, number 1 would finish ahead of number 2 in the standings, justifying their positions. However, this is not just the three of our power rankings. Instead, we asked every coach in the league to submit a 1 to 16 power ranking for every team in the league. And based off of that, we aggregated all the numbers and we came out to an average. And we requested they use this methodology, but they could use basically anything that they wanted to for their methodology. But before we start diving into the teams, anything you guys want to add about the ease or difficulty of power ranking this league?
This was tough. Basically, every single team I like to some degree. A lot of other draft leagues that I've done, pretty much every single team would have rated top 5 easy in any other draft I've seen. So it was really, really challenging, at least personally speaking, me this go around. And also the numbers that we're going to see are pretty interesting. And these are, of course, for fun. These are the preseason power rankings. They don't mean a lot. It's just a chance for us to chat about these teams and kind of get a sense for what the other coaches are thinking of these teams.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I completely agree. I don't think there's any bad team here. Like, all teams are good. I think, at least for me, when I was ranking them, it was more of a matter of preference or, like beliefs in a way, like things that I believe are good and things I believe are less good, but not necessarily anything bad.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. But without any further ado, let's look at our aggregated number 16 ranked coach, who is Cortex VGC. His average, that should say 15.33, not 5.33 was his average number, and that put him into rank 16. But looking at Cortex's team, we've got the Moltres G, the Whimsicott, Urshifu Rapid Strike, Marowak, Excadrill, Gothorita, and then he spent really heavy in his tier 1s and 2s, so then he had to have 4 different tier 7s to round out his group of 10 in Ghastly, Smoochum, Darumaka, and Cutiefly. So I think where a lot of people are critical of this team more so than they are of other teams is that it doesn't have the same variety of options as a lot of different teams. For example, the 6 that he's generally bringing, at least 5 of them every week and maybe 1 tier 7. So it's going to be a lot easier to prep for, even if those 6 are also very individually powerful. They all seem pretty linear, and one thing that I noticed while looking at this team is I had to check both Darumaka and Smoochum for this, but he doesn't have a priority or consistent way to proc the Moltres weakness policy, which is one of the main strategies with that Pokemon. So I'm very interested to see what he does with it, but I think the main critique of this team is that while it is objectively very powerful on paper, it is also very linear, and in a draft setting where you know what Pokemon your opponent's going to have, it seems easier to prep for than a lot of the other teams. What do you guys think?
The linearity kills it. That's I think the sticking point for a lot of coaches. I talked with a few other coaches about this team. The other thing is actually the speed tiers are pretty weird. Marowak is relatively quick for a TR Mon. Now, granted, he has Tailwind, but it is a little fast for a TR Mon, especially in this format. Most of the Mons are physical attackers, with really only the Whimsicott and the Galarian Moltres doing special output. And the other issue I see is that Whimsicott, to me, is pretty scary in a draft setting, because it is ridiculously easy to just fake out the Whimsicott slot, And then whatever other Pokemon you have on the field, if it's faster than base 97, unless he scarfs something, you outspeed his team. Which that's really, really scary. You do not want to have the ability for your opponent to have initial speed advantage on you in a draft setting. I think can be pretty important, at least personally speaking. And to me, it's like, if you just lead Fake Out, the Whimsicott can't set Tailwind, it can't Fake Tears you, it can't do any of that stuff. And then any other lead, if you have something faster than base 100, you will outspeed, which I think is really, really, really scary in terms of that sort of thing. This team has a ton of power. I mean, it can definitely do some work. I think some of the low tier mons are pretty good. I've used Ghastly before, actually. That mon's pretty solid, especially for tier 7. But overall, to me, it's just running into the issue of that I think it's a little too linear for most coaches' tastes, and I think that's why we saw such a consensus. What do you think, Otto?
I agree, and it to me was a little hard voting on this team because, you know, like we know Cortex, we know he's an extremely skilled VGC player, and this is a VGC team that he drafted. So in a way, like he drafted the perfect team for himself, you know. But you know, if we're thinking about the first rule that Dan showed us, you know, about forgetting who the players are and you know, thinking they're all the same level of skill, and you look at the team alone, then the team is linear and doesn't seem like a good team. But it was a little bit weird for me to vote it so low because, you know, thinking of who is the player and who the team he got feels like the perfect team for him.
Yeah, it is. Cortex is a very, very good player. But yeah, I'm not surprised that with our given methodology, this team ranked pretty low.
Yeah, I can agree with that, but let's go ahead and move on to the next team, which is Solenoy's team. Ryan, I'm going to let you take this, but I'm going to start explaining the numbers on the right a little bit, which are the individual placements. And then if there is some sort of outlier that is much higher or lower than the rest of the group, we did want to highlight that. If it's higher placements than the rest of the group on average, they're going to be green, and if it's a low outlier, they're going to be highlighted in red. So, Ryan, why don't you break down Solenoy's team a little bit?
Solenoy's team is pretty interesting. I actually like this team a fair bit to an extent. I think it's got some really cool stuff on it. And he did do a team breakdown stream, which I did manage to tune into. It gave me a little bit more insight into the team, but I didn't really seem to have missed much of anything from my initial impressions. So this team is also fairly top heavy. You're going to notice that these two bottom teams went very heavy in their tier 1s and their budgets. And a lot of our players that play a lot of draft felt like they were sacrificing a little too much versatility. I think Solinor's team, though, overall is much more versatile than Cortex's team. Incineroar can run a wide variety of sets, especially in draft. Finny has a ton of sets. Aleki doesn't have a ton of sets, but like the sets it has are really good, and it does have some variety there. Ferrothorn is pretty solid. Morgrim, I think, was an amazing pickup for him. Giving him that low tier prankster in that setting at that spot was a really good call. I like Gallade here a fair bit. In terms of his kind of tier 7 mons, I've used Lampent before, weirdly. I don't know, I've used a lot of these weird ass tier 7 mons. Lampent actually is not awful. For what it is essentially just a Trick Room option with Eviolite. It's kind of bulky. You can run Flash Fire on it, but I tend to like Flame Body better. It's pretty good at doing Imprison TR and generally being annoying, especially to physical TR threats. And then the Swirlix is Ite. With the Misty Terrain, it can do some stuff. I think it can outspeed base 130s. I think there's not anything that can outspeed it in the draft in terrain. Celio is not bad. Walrein is kind of a good low tier mon. It's got Belly Drum, some other stuff. And Archon has really good initial attacking stats for a tier 7 and Tailwind. So he got a lot of value out of the low tier mons, in my opinion. I think where a lot of people are probably coming down on this team is just that it is pretty top heavy. It does feel like the primary mons on the team are going to be the top 4 row that you see, and then you're going to slot in 2 others. And while those 4 mons are pretty versatile, I do think that to an extent, some of them are easier to deal with in draft. In draft, you are more likely to have Intimidate Deterrent. In draft, it is likely you have some way to override the terrain. Finney's initial attacking stats aren't the best, even if it can get pretty high. Regieleki tends to, other than the screen sets, tends to struggle a bit with some of the Lightning Rod Pokemon that are running around. So I think part of the problem a lot of folks are having is that while this looks like a really good VGC team, it doesn't necessarily seem like the most draft-oriented, versatile team. It feels, the other thing that happened a lot in his conversation was he talked a lot about the defensive synergy of the team, switching in and out of all these moves, and I'm sitting here thinking a lot of the time in draft, defensive synergy is amazing. I'm big on defensive synergy, but there is a degree to which your defensive synergy is also less important than that role versatility. And there are some defensive types kind of missing even still. So I think that's kind of where the team ended up where it is. I do like it, though. And I think he got some great tier 7 value. What do you think?
I'm going to pass this over to Otto really quick, then I'll add my comments at the end.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Ryan. I feel like I actually like this team a lot more than Cortex's team if you're thinking about like a draft VGC team, because even though it's a top heavy team, there are strategies here. Like you can see a lot of strategies that could come out with like Morgan and
Swagger Finny and stuff. Yeah, no,
exactly. Like there's a bunch of cool things that can be done, but I also love like every time like double intimidate with Finny. I think it's always amazing because we get a Calm Mind off and then all of a sudden like Finny is unkillable with intimidate, nerfing the physical attackers and the Calm Mind, making Finny really bulky. So I see like lots of cool synergies for draft in this team that I didn't see on the previous team. But I kind of agree with the point about the defensive synergy lacking a little bit, because if you look at this team, like there isn't many like airstream resists, for example. Even the steel type doesn't resist flying type moves specifically, so I think the only resist here is actually Eleki, which is not a mon that resists anything anyway. So I kind of challenge the notion of having good defensive synergy on this team.
Yeah, I will just add on to that saying, when I was looking at this team, I'm like, I kind of like this team. I like a lot of what it does. I like a lot of the potential that it has. I like a lot of the set versatility. But I'm not sure what other teams on this list I'm sure that it's better than. Whereas some of the other teams, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm sure this team's better than team X, Y, and Z. Just looking at this, and I think that's probably where my ranking for this team dropped a little bit, is does it have the potential to be a top 3 team being well piloted? Yes, absolutely. But am I sure that it's better than any other team on this list? I'm not really all that sure, and that's, I think, where my big mental hang-up was on this one. But moving on to the next team, we got Gumi 2020. So, Otto, do you want to give us a little breakdown of Gumi's team?
Yeah, for sure. So I think Gumi decided to draft a very, very offensive team here. In my opinion, it's the team with the most amount of like power output here. Like everything on this team does a lot of damage, of course, excluding Gumi itself. But like, we have a lot of heavy hitters on this team. Like Regigigas, I don't like it in a draft setting, but you can't deny that if he figures out a way that to play it, it's gonna wreck teams. Same with Charizard. Like Charizard is even now in Series 12 with restricteds, it's like destroying a lot of the meta. And you have like Garchomp even, so like a lot of heavy hitters and very fast team. I personally like this team. It's like I think we all said before, it's a matter of comparison. Like if we discard Gumi, who is in my opinion a very good offensive player, who is playing this very offensive team, if we take that out of the table, then this team, in comparison to the teams that are higher, lacks a little bit of other things that are important in draft, like speed tiers and defensive synergy and all of that. But On paper, it's a good team. It looks very scary and looks like, a lot of damage coming out of it.
Yeah, I can agree with that, and I actually had his team considerably higher than where it is ranked 14, and if you look at the average, Solinor's average was 14 point something, I believe, and Gumi's average is 11.2, so there's a pretty sizable jump in terms of the range of rankings here, where Gumi's team got some fairly high rankings along with some lower rankings. I do think that Sableye Charizard is going to be one of his best, most consistent modes this season, with a potential Sun mode and how hard that Charizard can hit. Archeops is definitely a decent tailwind setter, and Gigas Weezing, like you said, I'm not a huge fan of it, but I understand the threat that it does pose. So there are some pieces on this team that I like, but I think just overall, while I had it rated higher than this 14 spot, I can understand why there's a lot of hesitancy about rating this team high as well. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, my big thing is just that a lot of the mons are very frail. At the end of the day, I mean, Gigas obviously has some bulk. You got Weezing with some bulk, but Zard itself can sometimes struggle with kind of its defenses. Archeops is pretty frail. It's got a big ice weakness. Scoregeist has got a big ice weakness. Chomp has a big ice weakness. There's a lot of things like psychic types just like hit like everything for neutral, which feels really bad. Ghost typing seems really good into this team to get defense drops. Like Max Phantasm looks good. I mean, it's solid and I like it. I think my favorite thing on this team is actually, I'd agree with Dan, the Sableye Zard is probably my favorite mode. It's got some good tools. Like, this team is definitely going to be able to output some damage pretty quickly and kind of get itself on the field and assert dominance. I think Weezing is especially good because there are some teams that are pretty ability reliant that it can sort of shut down to an extent in of itself. So I think that it definitely is going to have a lot of potential in some games, but I really struggle to see if someone can match his output, find a way to match his output, get that advantage. He doesn't really have anything to switch into anything. It feels like a lot of these things are just going to get OHKO'd. And I think that's where a lot of coaches were running into the difficulty. I do like it, though. It's got pretty substantive counterplay to a couple of what I think are top teams, which I think is kind of a good thing. I think it has a kind of some underdog matchups where it can really pull some good wins.
Yeah, I can agree with all that. But moving on, we have Dina's team. So I'm going to give a quick breakdown here. And as you can see by the rating chart on the right, there have been some wide opinions on this team, anywhere from 3 to 14. So we've got a pretty classic Protect the King style team, where the king this time is Glastrier. The Glastrier is supported by the Amoonguss, Rotom Wash, and Togepi for pretty obvious reasons. Rotom Wash has a really good defensive typing for it. Oh, and the Bronzong can set Trick Room for it pretty well. So her first 5 picks are all dedicated to activating this Glastrier and letting it do the things that it can do. And then she sort of rounds out the rest of her team with I would say a decent fast core with the Diggersby, the Crobat, which provided her some nightmares one season in the MDL playoffs, the Centiskorch, the Espeon, and the Impidimp, which is very solid in where she got it for Tier 6. Overall, I think this is a solid team that in a lot of leagues would look like a pretty easy top 5 team. But if we're looking at it critically compared to a lot of the teams on this list, the damage output is almost strictly physical, except for the Rotom and the Espeon. The Glastrier is very well supported, but that's a lot of support for a single strategy that if you're able to shut down that strategy, that really limits the number of mons she's going to be able to use. Now, that strategy is going to be difficult to shut down with the amount of support that she has, but beyond the Glastrier and the Diggersby, I'm really nervous about the damage output potential of this team, and if she can't get up Tailwind with Crobat, then her offensive speed tiers that when she's not under Trick Room are not going to be all that good at all. So there are definitely some major positives in that Glastrier is one of the 2 Pokemon you want to be able to most protect to let go off, but the negatives I think are her speed tier, her the damage potential outside of that Glastrier, and just overall, the threat diversity isn't as great as it is for other teams. But what do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I think part of my main issue is that I look at this team and I look at those first 5 picks and I'm like, okay, yeah, this is a nightmare. And Dina is my week 1 opponent, so I'm not going to get too in depth. Part of the thing I think a lot of coaches had issue with, and it was something I had issue with, I think, is that the three of the kind of, if you ignore the Rotom, which I think is an amazing piece on this team, Glastrier, Diggersby, and Centiskorch all share some kind of a type weakness. And all of them are physical attackers that you can deal with by lowering their physical attack. So it's a protect the king strategy, but all of your backup modes are handled the same way as your main mode. You know, you can burn, charm, set reflect, whatever, against a Glastrier, and she doesn't have a fallback where Diggersby suddenly isn't also vulnerable to those same strategies. And also Glastrier, Centiskorch both share a rock weakness. Diggersby, Glastrier both share a fighting weakness. So even your tech options you don't have to go too out of your way when it comes to teching moves to hit them. So I think that's where a lot of people came down on it. I do really, really like this team. I think it's super threatening. I am not happy I have to play Dina week 1. But I do understand why there is some hesitancy around the team. Because to me, it's like the core 5 Mons combined with like some Crobat shenanigans looks like the best thing this team has to offer, when I'm really, really worried about the fact that some of these offensive pieces simply are so similar that you don't need to do additional prep to handle them. So that's kind of my thought. What do you have, Otto?
I mean, you guys basically covered everything. The only thing I would add is that I really like the Centiskorch pick for this team, exactly because of what you were saying. It's like one of a few mons that there is no way to burn and there is no way to intimidate,
Yeah.
Because of the white smoke ability. So I really like that pick because of that, because that covers the weakness from Glacier and Diggersby, and also like allows for some cool decks that she can run. But other than that, I agree with everything you said.
Yep, Centiskorch and Heatmore. Put some respect on that name. But moving on to the next team, we have Goomer's team, and we also have the first time we are seeing the red over there for some very underrated ratings as well. So Ryan, why don't you break down Goomer's team here?
I really like this team, actually. So Goomer's team is Boltund, Crocodile, Serena, Slowking, Volcarona, Corviknight, Poltegeist, Beartick, Tentacruel, Bonsly, Guzzlord, and Hitmonchan. If you watched his breakdown, it appears that Goomer was affected by peer pressure for every single pick. That video is very funny. I'd recommend to watch. In terms of the team itself, I really like a lot of the lead options this team has in particular. To me, this team feels really good to lead with. Boltund can be a very annoying, fast supportive mon, and if you pair that kind of a thing with Serena, or if you have like a Serena Crook lead, I feel like the Slowking can set Trick Room relatively reliably. Poltegeist is actually, it's pretty hard to get it set up, but if you can get like a weak armor Poltegeist sweep going, I think that's a really nice low tier value. Guzzlord in certain matchups is very threatening, especially if it's positioned well. I think Volcarona is a mon that's typically pretty underrated, both as a redirector, but also just as a nice offensive piece. I think Corviknight is a very powerful potential max option as well. And I like the utility that's offered by the Hitmonchan and the Tentacruel to an extent. I'm not 100% on... I haven't seen Tentacruel drafted a whole lot. Every time I've seen it drafted, it seems to do okay. I don't have any huge thoughts on it. And Bonsly, as far as tier 7s go, it's okay. It's got better stats than a lot of stuff in that tier. I think the general reason some coaches might not be a little lower on this team, it's not super defined in its modes. You've got a really good Trick Room setter in the Slowking. You've got a Tailwind setter with the Corviknight as well. So you have like Trick Room, that kind of thing covered. But other than that, I'm like, it's very hard for me to see like what specific mode Goomer's going to go with for any given game. It feels like a more defensive counterplay oriented team. to an extent. I also don't necessarily love the speed tiers outside of the Bolton. Bolton really helps this team out in that respect, but I think another faster mon or two, because it's like, I think the Bolton and Volk are the two fastest things. I think a little bit more speed variety, maybe another couple things on the slower end would help out this team. I do like it quite a bit, though. I think I have this team higher rated than 12 on my own personal list, but I definitely can see where some folks are coming from. It's an assortment of really, really good mons that I'm not 100% sure how well they work together as of yet.
What do you think, Otto?
No, I agree, and I know Goomer, we've played in many leagues before. I think this is the typical Goomer team. It's like a team that at first you look at and you don't understand what it does, and then he starts bringing really weird stuff and it works somehow.
Yeah, I've seen Goomer play. I'm aware.
Yeah, and it's hilarious. Like you think it's not gonna work, and it somehow he makes it work. So. This is the typical Goomer team, in my opinion. I do like a lot of what he's doing here. Actually, two of the mons that he has were things that I was considering, the Crocodile and the Volcarona. I love Volcarona in draft. To me, it's one of the best mons, specifically because you never know what's going to do, if it's going to redirect, if it's going to burn you, if it's going to struggle bug you, or if it's just going to be offensive. So I really like that pick. I've played Slowking before too. Love it, especially with an Intimidator next to it because of its natural special bulk. And I really like that he got Tailwind on Corviknight. So I think there's a lot that this team can do, and Goomer will probably figure out new stuff that it can do because that's how he plays. So and also he hasn't drafted Bolton for a while. I think 4 or 5 different leagues, and he loves that mon and he uses it really consistently normally. So excited to see him trying that out on this league.
Yeah, I can agree with a lot of that. I do think Volcarona is really good for where its value was. I had it on a couple of different draft plans early, and getting that in round 5 is very good value for him. And I think Tentacruel can be looked at as super, super, super discount Solgaleo, just with that Bulldoze proc where you're not going to be lowering your own speed. And his team speeds are enough that he might be able to put them in either Trick Room or Tailwind, but they're stretching in both directions, so I can understand that as well. But I agree, there are some defined modes on this team, but I don't see a huge amount of them. And I'm really interested to see how they tech together, because overall I do think this is a very solid team that covers a lot of bases. I think it does everything at least a 6 or 7 out of 10 level, but I don't think it does anything at a 9 or 10 out of 10 level. And I think that lack of an exceptional mode is what hampered this team in many coaches' eyes. But moving on to this next team, we've got Chaos Knight Rider, and who's on this one? Am I on this one? I can take this one. So we've got Suicune, Magnezone, Obstagoon, we've got the Mienshao, Salamence, Comfey, Mudsdale, Salazzle, Regice, and Uxie. So first things first, a lot of really cool Pokemon that I'm excited to see used. The Regice, I want to see what it does because I've never really seen it used all that successfully in draft. Obstagoon, a lot of people say they really like Obstagoon, but I've seen it drafted a lot and I've never seen it really pop off, but I know it has the potential to. So I want to see what it does in some very, very capable hands here. Mienshao is one of my favorite support options for the value. Suicune is very solid for the value. But if I'm looking at the rankings here, and I'm seeing some 1s and some 2s, and then some things like 14 and 16, right? So there's a lot of opinions. At least one coach thinks this is the best team that's drafted. At least one coach thinks this is the worst team that's drafted. And I'm going to try to explain both. Best team that's drafted, it has really good defensive synergy. It has decent offensive synergy as well. You can see how all the pieces fit together. You can see why the Comfey and the Salamence work well together. You can see the value in the Suicune. You can see how the Mienshao is going to support a lot of different options on this team, and he's got the ability to go either fast or slow. But why would someone think this is the worst team in the league? it doesn't have a lot of initial presence for damage output outside of that Salamence. So if you have something good to answer Salamence, everything else on his team, except for maybe that Magnezone, really needs to set up before it's going to threaten you offensively. So if you have something with, say, Fairy and Ground type coverage, or Ice and Ground type coverage into his team, you're really going to neuter a lot of his offensive potential, and it's going to take him some time to get the ball rolling. And if it takes time to get the ball rolling for everything except for 2 Mons, then there's a lot of opportunity that this team can get rolled over by teams that are just going to be able to go faster than it and not need as much setup potential. But what do you think, Ryan?
I don't know with this team. I really like a lot of it. I think a lot of the Mon picks are very cool. Like you were saying, I am very, very pumped to see the Obstagoon. I actually am really interested to see the Mudsdale as well. I feel like this team has some options for Mudsdale that break from the norm. I also drafted a Lake Guardian, so I am excited to see how another Lake Guardian does as well. But for me, I had a really hard time ranking this team. And seeing kind of the range it got is pretty notable. I think I had some issues with initial output as well. I do think that setup is pretty consistent in draft, especially if you're the type of player that knows how to do it. And I mean, the things he has to set up with are very consistent. Suicune is not my favorite Tailwind setter because I like faster ones, but it is hands down probably one of the most consistent ones. So if you run a Mental Herb on it and it's Inner Focus, it's getting Tailwind up on the field. Comfey has base 100 speed. It can, if you don't have a fake out user that beats base 100, you can't flinch it. It'll click whatever button it wants. Mianshao's an amazing support piece as well to that sort of a thing. So like, I really, really understand that a lot of it looks very consistent. I'm just not 100% convinced on how I'm not 100% convinced though that even with that high level of consistency, I'm not 100% sure that some other teams that maybe are ranked above it don't have the tools to stopgap that consistency. So I'm super curious to see this one. I watched a lot of Case Knight Riders games, and I really, really was impressed with how they played them. So I'm super excited to see how they use this team. Rank 11 might be a little low for it, but you know, this was a league vote, and I'm curious to see what he pulls out. What do you got, Otto?
Yeah, I think I voted it pretty high, like fourth or fifth. I don't remember now, but I think it's a really, really good team. All of these mons, like most of them I've used before. You know, Salazzle, I love Salazzle, I love Mienshao, I love Mudsdale a lot. I don't love Salamence, but I think my problem with it was more because it was a non-Dynamax format, so I think it could be really good in Max. Like Suicune is a nightmare to deal with. Obstagoon can you know has a lot of things that it can do, lots of different sets. So I really, really like this team, especially because I see the defensive synergies of this, and I kind of agree with what Dan said about the immediate damage output. Or even though there is like stuff like Guts, Obstagoon, and Reckless Mienshao that you know are like stealthily doing a lot of damage, but I kind of agree with that point of lacking a little bit of immediate damage, but at the same time, the switching potentials here are so good that it might not need to do immediate damage. You know, because it can start to have things switching in and out and lingering on the field to a point where all of a sudden the opponent is already in a bad place. So I voted this team really high because to me all the mons are really solid here, and I see the potential. But I can understand too, like whoever it was that voted it 16th and 14th, because you know at the first time you look at it, it doesn't look like that threatening.
Yeah, I can see that argument as well, and I will point out that between these 12 to 10 here, they're all within I think 0.2 of one another, so this is a really close band. But Ryan, why don't you go over Sakamoto, whose team is ranked 10th?
You gave me this team. I don't know. Dude, Sakimoto drafts the weirdest teams and he makes them work. I'm always very excited. This team, though, does generally make a lot of sense to me. So we've got T-Tar, Articuno Galar, Tangrowth, Stoutland, Klefki, Jolteon, Dusknoir, Golduck, Sandslash, Turtonator, Machamp, and Nuzleaf. So firstly, there's obviously a sand mode here with the T-Tar Stoutland sort of thing. I actually think that can work really well. Stoutland works as, I actually think, I've seen it both sweep in sand and support in sand very well, both with like after use support and like it can proc surf, I think, to also proc like weakness policies. And if you're not doing supportive, you can also like just run offensive Stoutland, and it's actually not an awful max option, especially if you help it out. The Tangrowth is a nice redirector for the squad. Klefki covers that really nice prankster niche. The Jolteon is one of the faster mons on this team. Articuno is really nice. I've actually found that mon to be pretty threatening when I've seen it used. Part of the reason is that the max moves that hit this thing also boost it. So you run into the fact that it's a little scary to hit the Articuno with moves that you'd want to hit it with outside of like electric type moves. It generally also is good too because it has nice roll compression. Articuno can do a whole lot. It can support with like Tailwind and TR and Imprison, and it also has really nice offensive sets as well. We've got a Dusknoir here, which also has a Shadow Sneak proc for the Articuno. That's fun. Golduck to stop other weather, which is interesting, and also I guess Swift Swim Sweep somehow. Not 100% sure on that. Sandslash is also here. It's being used with the sand mode. The one time I've seen Sandslash used on a sand mode was with Maxwell and MDL, and he really didn't like it. So I'm excited to see if Sakimoto can get that thing working really well. Turtonator is certainly not a bad mon. I really do like a lot of what it offers to this team. Machamp is, I think, a very consistent fighting type. It's got a lot of bulk, a lot of presence. Nuzleaf, it's got Fake Out, and it's fast in the sun. I'm not really sure what else it's doing here, but I'm excited to see it. Overall, I think it's a really well put together team. I understand where all the pieces are, all the niches are. I just think that some of the picks, maybe to some people, aren't particularly flashy, as I guess is the word I'd use. For maybe some folks, I also think that you are also kind of looking at mons that I do think have a bit of polarized opinions. So that's sort of my thoughts. I think this is a pretty solid team. I like a lot of what it's doing. It makes a lot of sense to me. But at the same time, there is this element of it's got the sand mode, and then it's a lot of really good tools, but I'm not sure everything in the sand mode necessarily needs the kind of tools he gave it. So what do you think, Dan?
Yeah, I can agree with that as well. I think Klefki is very good, but very confusing support, because the move pool on it is never quite as good as you want it to be. I understand what it's doing on this team, but I do think that compared to a lot of the other prankster options, it could be viewed in a less favorable light on this team specifically, especially since it's the only steel type and the only fairy type as well. So that's two of the better defensive typings that are being put onto a Klefki without great defensive stats. So that's a potential weak link. I love the Jolteon pick. Like, the Jolteon pick is awesome. I think Jolteon is always underrated in draft, and he's going to pop off with it this season. I think the type diversity on this team and the defensive synergy is generally very good. Tangrowth and Articuno both have pretty high levels of roll compression. Tyranitar is theoretically threatening, so I had this team a bit higher than the average coach did, and I like a lot of what it does. But again, I think Sakamoto, very similar to Goomer, has a team that is very, very solid in a lot of things, but you don't see anything that just screams like, wow, this is a threat every week, and I absolutely need to prep for this mode. So he's going to, and I think that's both a good and a bad thing. He's going to have a lot of flexibility in his builds every week, but it just doesn't have the over-the-top potential of some of the teams ahead of it. But what about you, Otto? What are your thoughts?
I agree with you guys. I really like this team too. Like, I think I ranked it higher as well. Like, I for sure ranked it higher. I'm not sure if I ranked it higher than you guys, but I did rank it high. I like a lot of what it does. Like, I really love the Articuno pick here, especially because one of the best ways to deal with, sand modes is intimidating them, and then you have a competitive mon that kind of discourages that. That's something I really like. And a lot of other things that I'm not gonna, say because might give away some of Saki's strategies. I've helped him draft in the high roller league like recently, so I kind of know his drafting style. So I'm trying to be careful to not give away anything. But I generally really like this team. I agree with you too. Like I love Jolteon in draft and in general because the speed tier is so good that it kind of makes up for all its lacking of move sets and even defensive prowess. So I really like the Jolteon pick here too. The mon that I don't like here, to be honest, is Klefki. I struggle with this mon a lot, basically because I really like the steel types to be defensive, and Klefki is not defensive and doesn't even resist steel, so it's a little weird to me. But that's a personal thing. In general, I really like this team.
Yeah, I think overall this is definitely a solid team, but Otto, why don't you take the lead on Tay's team here?
Yeah, for sure. I really like this team as well. Like it feels repetitive that we're always saying this, but it's true. Like all the teams look really good. And this one I really like. I had we talked about the team right after the draft, me and Tay. He was wondering if he should get the Colossal, and I think it was a good pickup by him. I really like a lot of the mons here. He has three really good in the focus mons. To me, Kangaskhan is really good because it's one of the best TR counters in the game, because has Scrappy and can fake out to the ghost mons, and he has an inner focus so that it can eject the other stuff with, I think it's circle throw that it gets. So I really like this thing. And yeah, it's generally a really good mon. Spectre is really solid in draft. Umbreon, it's a nightmare to deal with, to be honest. So yeah, I think this team's gonna do really well, and Tay's a really good player, so I expect a lot from this team.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm actually going to disagree with you a little bit. Yes, I think the team is really good, but I was looking at my rankings, looking at this team, and the Colossal pickup is actually something that I had as a bit of a negative, because I think Gyarados, which is what was in that spot, looked really good on this team. Gyarados next to Spectrier just seemed like an amazing potential lead option, and although I can see there are definitely some triggers for this Colossal, I'm not sitting here saying there's no Urshifu, no Dragapult Colossal bad. I just think Colossal is going to be less consistent on this team than it is in a lot of other leagues, just based on the skill cap of the league as well. When I've run Colossal in a season before, and I found that the more skill the opponent has, the harder it is to get Colossal into a good position in draft, because people can prep around it. But I don't know, I just thought the Gyarados looked really, really good on this team, and that was the biggest negative for me, was the fact that he dropped the Gyarados. That actually dropped him in my rankings. I would have had this team probably top 3 pretty easily if it still had the Gyarados on it, because I think the rest of this team is absolutely phenomenal. I think the Spectre and the Umbreon work well together. I love that he's got that terrain mode option. Spritzy is a great low-tier Trick Room setter. I respect Kangaskhan and Dragonite working together. There's just so much to really love about this team, but just that one transaction, I think it just lowered some of the team synergistically and overall power for me, that I'm not as high on this team as I was. But don't get me wrong, it's still a great team, obviously, but man, if this thing still had Gyarados, this would be competing for my number 1 spot. But Ryan, I have a feeling you feel fairly similar.
Oh, dude, I loved the Gyarados on this team. I literally DM'd you after he dropped the Gyarados for Cole and was like, god damn it. I really liked the Gyarados on this team. I really liked the Lightning Rod potential too with Pincurchin, not just the terrain. I liked having a lot of teams are surprisingly Intimidate soft. We haven't really talked about it much, but there actually are quite a few teams that are kind of vulnerable to Intimidate. And that he could have taken really good advantage of that. Moxie Airstream boosters are also just really good. I feel like Colossal is generally a little overrated in draft. I tend to see it underperform pretty frequently. But other than that, I mean, I just use Spectrier. I love that thing. I think it's one of hands down the best tier 1 options that was available. I think I'm really excited to see Toxicroak used. I'm a big Toxicroak fan. That mon does not get enough usage. Dragonite as well is a mon I've seen perform exceptionally well. Over time, I have grown to understand that Kangaskhan is an absolute monster. I do like the Maractus here to help the Colossal, though, so I will comment on that. I do like the Maractus pickup for it. I like the Swampert as well. I think Pincurchin is a mon that, and that was actually my biggest snipe of the draft. I was going to take Pincurchin over my stupid Pikachu I have. But aside from that, I mean, I really, really like this team. And also, in terms of players, this maybe is my hot take of the game of the day, because Dan and I watched replays for every single coach pretty extensively for this league. If you put a gun to my head right now and asked me who I think is the most likely person to win this league, I actually might say Tay, just based on what I've seen from him. I'm sure he knows what he's doing. I'm not worried about it. I take the rank 9 and kind of move on with your day, my guy. But yeah, this is I did really like the team with the Gara, but otherwise I think this is a really standout team.
So the next team on our list is yours, Ryan, and I guess I'll take this one. So you've got the Dragapult, Clefairy, Galarian Zapdos, Araquanid, Pikachu, Nihilego, Mesprit, Riolu, Persian, Snorunt, and Galarian Stunfisk. This team does have the widest range of opinions. It is tied for first for the number of first place rankings with 3. It also has 3 rankings that are 13th or worse. And then, it's also got, a 2 and a 3 and a couple 12s and some 10s and a 4. So this team's been all over the place. You actually only have one rating between 5 and 9. Everything else is you're either top 4 or bottom 6-ish team. So there's a lot of disparate opinions here, and I'm gonna try and discuss why both of those could be the case. I was one generally, full disclosure, that liked this team a bit more than average, but I just think that Clefairy supports the 2 fast offensive options really well, and then Dragapult and Zapdos work really well together. You can max Ghost something, and then Zapdos will kill everything. You can Scarf the Zapdos, give it a Thunderous Kick, and then Dragapult's going to be able to kill stuff. They both work very well with Araquanid, and you're not Intimidate soft because you can't Intimidate the Zapdos and you can't Intimidate the Dragapult either, and you're not super Burn soft because the Araquanid can't be burned, and then you also have the Nihilego and the Mesprit, which are both decent special coverage. One potential point of weakness is the Pikachu, but we also did see Pikachu recently finish top 32 at Salt Lake City Regionals in a restricted format, so it does have some potential to do some things successfully. Riolu for support seems really good on this team, as does the Persian. Snorunt just gives you, I believe, an Inner Focus, priority Ice Shard proc for some weakness policies, and Stunfisk exists. Overall, I think it's a solid team, but there are some potential weaknesses in that it is a very, very frail team if you get rid of that Clefairy. Like, it seems very centralized on protecting that Clefairy, otherwise you are a lot of things, if they can get the speed advantage on you, are going to give your team a really hard time offensively, because so many of your mons are imbalanced bulk, where they're either very specially or very physically bulky, and not the other way around. But Otto, let's hear your thoughts on it before we get Ryan's thoughts on his own team.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, no, I like this, and like I said, like, I like all teams basically from like the ones from now on. I like all those teams. Dragapult is usually a mon that is really hard to deal with in draft because it can do everything. Basically, can be offensive, can be defensive, can be attacker, can be physical, really fast. it is actually surprisingly bulky because, especially in draft, you don't ever need to like run off full speed. So there's a lot of leftover EVs that you can just invest in its defenses. So usually surprisingly bulky. I just had a season where I had Dragapult on my team. It was amazing throughout the season. So just having Dragapult alone gives this team a really solid defensive and like a very Swiss Army knife kind of mon, which I really like, and pairing it with Clefairy makes it really strong. What I struggle with this team a little bit is that outside of Dragapult, Zapdos, Arachnid, and maybe the Nihilego, you don't have much in terms of offensive pressure, and those, even though they are great, they are not super hard to neutralize. So that's my thing with this team, but it's still a really good team. Like you can see that if you can neutralize these 4 mons that I talked about, there's not too much damage coming out of it. So it makes it a little bit easier. If you had like maybe a 5th or a 6th offensive threat, it would be harder to do it. But with just those 4, it might be a little. It would. I mean, it's always hard to say that when you have a Dragapult. That, like I said, it's very unpredictable. But like with all your damage coming from 4 mons, it's not as hard to prep for. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
What do you think about your team, Ryan?
Okay, so I did not give myself one of the first place rankings, just so I can get that out of the way. I do like my own team, though, quite a bit. No, I'm pretty excited for this team. I think it is going to be very fun. I do disagree with the notion that my only damage is coming from those 4 mons. I have plenty of other stuff that can do damage and support damage fine. I'm not too... I actually think that damage output is one of the strengths of the team rather than a weakness. I almost wish I had a little bit more support, honestly. So...
Yeah, I think the Mesprit is a sneaky damage output potential. Really good value for where it was tiered as well.
Yeah, so that's pretty much it, though. I'm pretty excited for the season. I'm not going to reveal a whole lot. I'll do a team reveal at some point, probably after this video is released. So,
all right. Well, we can move on to the next team. And Ryan, I'll let you cover this one. This one is Maxwell's team.
Yeah, I'm actually a pretty big fan of this team. So it has Duraludon, Togekiss, Marowak, Slowbro, Indeedee, Blacephalon, Lurantis, Frostmoth, Morpeko, Fletchling, Machoke, and Lairon. So this team, I think, did a really good job of getting some of that tier 2, tier 3 value really exceptionally well. Indeedee, Blacephalon is a very, very threatening expanding force mode. That is an option. Honestly, just the Marowak Togekiss Slowbro is such a threatening core with the Marowak being able to have Lightning Rod to help out the Togekiss, and getting that for such a low value was kind of huge. It also pairs extremely well with the Slowbro itself, and Trick Room matchups. Duraludon ignoring redirection is very, very nice. I think also getting your Dragon Fairy Steel Core in your first 2 picks is generally good. I've been using Lurantis a lot. I think it's really great. I know not everyone's going to be sold on Frostmoth, but I have seen Maxwell use it. It is a very, very threatening mon, and it's a good comfort pick for him. Morpeko has some cool stuff. It's got Parting Shot. It's got some pretty okay utility, along with being able to output some solid damage. In terms of his low tier mon, I mean, Fletchling's just priority Tailwind, basically. That's what it exists for. Machoke is actually, as far as the tier goes, is pretty good. Eviolite on it makes it relatively bulky. I've actually worked with Machoke with Maxwell before. It also has Guts as well, which can be useful. And Lairon gets Sturdy, so you don't really have to worry about the Eviolite pressure as much. I don't think it'll come that often, but it's pretty cool. Just overall, I mean, the team doesn't... The big thing with this team is the speed tiers. It doesn't really have anything that's the fastest thing I'm pretty sure is Blacephalon. It doesn't have anything that's super breaking out in terms of speed, but man, the offensive defensive synergy is through the roof with this team. It's got, I think, one of the most threatening Trick Room modes of any of the teams, and it does have both Tailwind, redirection and trick room as well, and just some really nice offensive blitz potential as well. So those are kind of my thoughts. I was very high on this team. I will admit I'm one of the 3 outlier votes on this one, for near the top. What do you got?
Otto, I'll let you take this next.
No, for sure. Yeah, I like this team too. To me, I agree with Ryan with everything he said. Basically, the thing I would add to this is not only the speed tiers that bother me a little bit, it's also like the physical offense of this team. Because, yeah, you can be like, it's good that you have a lot of special attackers that won't be intimidated, but like at the same time, I keep thinking about like monsters like, I don't know, like Suicune, for example, would be a nightmare for this team to deal with because it snarls you forever and never dies. It's not like you have too much to deal with it other than Morpeko, which is frail and can be killed by the partner or the Lurantis. So that's my biggest problem with this team, but it's solid, really good team building and like Ryan said, I think one of the good teams of this season.
Yeah, I can agree a bit with both of those. I was actually recently looking at Blacephalon, and it has higher physical attack than you think. Like, yes, its special attack is through the roof at like a 157, but I think its physical attack is still 127. So
yeah,
I wouldn't
it's pretty high.
I wouldn't be surprised to see physical Blacephalon at one point or another. And then something sneaky that I think this team can do is Marowak under Tailwind, because Marowak's speed tier will allow it to outspeed base 130s under Tailwind. So if he is setting that priority Tailwind with Fletchling at any point, and he's going against something like a Tapu Koko, and he's got this Marowak, you can actually threaten the Tapu Koko with the Marowak before the Koko is able to move. So that's just an interesting little tidbit just about the team building and the speed tiers that he chose. Pretty similar with Lurantis. He can get fast with it and then superpower before something else has the chance to move and get the defense boosts rolling. So overall, I do think this is a very, very solid team. I had it in sort of the upper echelon of teams, not as high as Ryan is on it, but I do think that it's going to have a good chance every week, and it's going to be a headache to team build for. But moving on to the next team, Otto, I will let you handle El Flamingo's team, which is the other team that is tied for first place in the number of first place rankings with 3 of them, along with 2 second place ones. But it's also ranked as low as 13th and 14th, and there are a lot of people higher on his team than him. I'll put it like that. But what do you think about this team, Otto?
Yeah, I think I was one of the people who voted it the best team of the season. And I think this team is really good. Like, if you were on the chat, you know how high I am on Celesteela. To me, it's by far the best mon in this format, especially in drafts. Because even more than Dragapult, it can do really everything. Like in the offensive, physical, like in the defensive, go for stall sets, like lead speed, go for meteor beam sets. Like you can do anything with this team, and it's a nightmare to prep for. Especially because it also only has 2 weaknesses. So, I mean, just talking about it, I'm already like, okay, I have to be a Celesteela this season. It's very annoying to think about. So yeah, to me, that alone should put it in the top 5 because it's a very annoying monster. Then you have other stuff that are really good in my opinion. Like you have the rain mode, which is solid. You can it's probably gonna be deleted by like Rillabones and stuff, but you only face 1 Rillabones, so it'll be okay. Then you have Tailwind with Pelipper, which is also very annoying to deal with because you kind of have to choose who you do damage to attack the Sicytoad or the Pelipper, and you always have to decide, and that might give you an opportunity to get Tailwind up. Then it has the Manectric also protecting the Celesteela, just like the Rotom Heat. So I think Celesteela is really well protected. I can see the point of this being a little bit of a protect the king strategy of a team, but at the same time you have stuff like Como, which you can't leave alone. You have stuff like the Copper Grigus, which is very annoying, can start stealing your abilities and setting up iron defenses and body presses. stuff like Lifer, which combined with any special attack that can fake you, so you can do a lot of annoying things. And like you can even have the copycat stuff with either the Queen Flank, which might be a little too fast for that, or the Confusion. So I think this team has a lot of options, and when prepping for a team like that, in my opinion, it's always really hard because like you end up over prepping for Celesteela, and that ends up leaving yourself open to the other threats of the team. So yeah, I think this is a really good Celesteela team, and because Celesteela is such a good mon, a really good Celesteela team, in my opinion, should be the best team in the company.
Yeah, I can see that a lot. Like, I absolutely agree there is good support around the Celesteela with the Manetric, with the Rain mode. The Komo is pretty interesting, but this team does have something that makes me nervous, and it's the damage output if the Celesteela goes down. Like, beyond the Celesteela, and even including the Celesteela, the base damaging stats on this team are not great. They're a bit lackluster. Because Celesteela is below 110 in both of its offenses. Of course, you can trigger weakness policy on it, but if you're able to deny that, the Rotom's below base 110 in both of it. I actually don't know Seismitoad off the top of my head.
Seismitoad's only 85 or 95 if it's physical.
Okay.
And then Como actually, I'm pretty sure, is the highest attacking stat on this team, because Como has 110.
Yeah.
Which, like, yeah, I had a very similar thought.
Yeah, but that's sort of my main problem with this team is that, yes, on paper, everything looks good and looks like it works together, but if you deny a setup option on this team, it just doesn't have the power to break through a lot of threats. Like, yes, defensively, it is solid, but I think in draft a lot, a good offensive team is going to win out over a good defensive team, because offensive teams will start doing damage and break through a defensive core before a defensive team is able to get fully set up. And that's my biggest potential point of weakness with this team, where I see why some coaches ranked it fairly low. But like Tangela and Magnetric and Pelipper, obviously great mons with Celesteela, and I also think the Liepard as well. But what do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I rated this team a little bit more in the middle. My big thing is that I kind of disagree with the notion that everything around the Steela threatens as much as the Steela. Like, my problem is that to me, I don't feel like you're talking about, okay, you have to over prep for the Steela, but then he can whip out, the Rotom or the Seismitoad, and it's like, okay, but they have like less than base 110 attacking stats. Like, if I have anything relatively bulky, I can probably handle those as long as I have good Steela answers. That's kind of my main issue. It's a super, super well-supported Steela team. I think that it is, as far as Protect the King strategies go, I mean, Steela's a great mon to build your Protect the King around. I think the Liepard is going to get a ton of good use on this team. I do think it's well-supported. I do like that this team has a rain mode. I think the low-tier picks were generally good. I like the Como, the Tauros a lot, actually, and the Kling Klang I think are all fine. My big thing is that I don't think that I really don't see see the best mode as being Protect the Steela, and that means that people are going to prep for the Steela, and I think the other modes aren't going to necessitate as much, because he just doesn't have, obviously Rotom can Nasty Plot, Como can Belly Drum, like those are things they can do for sure, but I've never been able to see those things happen with enough consistency in other draft leagues for me to really be sold on it. By the way, Rotom Heat and Celesteela are great defensive partners. I do like that a lot.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. But let's go ahead and take a look at this next team, which is Snoots. I'll take this one. So this team is Blastoise, Weavile, Trevenant, Herdier, Hawlucha, Indeedee Female, Hatterene, Noivern, Xurkitree, Silvally, and Tyrogue. First of all, I want to comment a little bit on Snoot's draft strategy here, seeing where he picked that Indeedee and what he had around it. I think getting the Indeedee and hat where he did with the points around it, like, the way he handled the draft was very, very good. Like, I think the fact that he was able to get Ndidi there makes this team, because if Ndidi wasn't available there, this would have been considerably worse than it is, but he did get it there, so I think it is very solid. And then I want to look at the rest of this team. Obviously, you have Ndidi Hat, which we know is going to be able to set Trick Room, be threatening. Trevenant is decently operational in Trick Room. You've got an Unburden with the Hawlucha with the Ndidi. You've got Ndidi Follow Me to protect the Blastoise that's setting up Shell Smash. You've got Ndidi letting a Xurkitree do stuff. And you've also got the potential Tailwind option from a Noivern. So I think overall this team is very, very synergistic. All the pieces make sense together. They all look like they function together. You see how they're going to fit into a cohesive core. But this is a critique that I've had for a number of teams in this range, is the initial damage output seems low, except for that Xurkitree. And everything on this team revolves around this Ndidi, right? Like, the Hawlucha does, the ability to set up the Blastoise does, unless you want to run support Blastoise, but in that case you probably don't want the Psychic terrain out. The Hatterene's not going to get up Trick Room that often without the Ndidi. The Xurkitree is just going to die without the Ndidi. Like, everything rotates around this Ndidi, and Ndidi's probably the best Pokemon in the format to fill that role. But again, it's one where everything feels really, really centralized on one Pokemon, and if you're able to successfully mitigate that, like a Brave Zero-Speed Rillaboom is going to be really tough for this team to deal with. Something like that that's just overriding terrain and then immediately going to threaten that Ndidi. You're going to have a much harder time dealing with it, and then some spread damage is also going to look difficult for this team to deal with in certain matchups. But overall, I actually do really like this team, because you can just feel the way that everything works together and everything makes sense on this team, except for maybe Tyrogue. Everything else just makes sense on this team, and you see what it's looking to do, what it's going to try and do, and it's going to be hard to prep for every potential mode, because I think this is the one team so far that every Pokemon except Tyrogue is likely to come to multiple weeks. But again, the centralization on the Ndidi is my biggest potential hang-up about this team, but overall I do think it's really good. But what do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I tend to agree with pretty much everything you've said laid out here. I do want to comment, I really like Weavile on this team. I've been seeing Charles use Weavile, Blastoise, and MDL this most recent season to pretty great success. I think that it also Hawlucha's a mon that, like, yes, you can Psychic Seed and Unburden or whatever, but man, is it so much better if you have a potential Inner Focus Weakness Policy proc for it, like a Weavile. I think that the fact that is also being facilitated the way it is good. I do think Weavile opens up this team quite a bit. I like the Noivern as well. I think that having Tailwind where he got it is pretty good. Actually, one of my weird criticisms is I don't understand why he got Herdier when he did. I don't think that was a mon that was on most people's radars. It was, 15 points? Like, it seems kind of weird that you'd grab that before Ndidi Hat. I don't know, just seemed kind of odd to me. Otherwise, though, I really do like this team a lot. I rated it pretty highly myself. I was a big fan of a lot of the synergy on the team. I do think that it might... I ended up not rating it, like, first overall, because I do think... I agree with the critique that it is very centered around Ndidi, but as someone who's used Ndidi for a whole season, if you are going to center your season around one mon, Ndidi's certainly not a bad one to facilitate your team. So I generally think this team's very solid. I'm excited to see how Snoop plays it. It's definitely got a lot of potential, and I really actually like the Xurkitree and Silvally, how they glue kind of the rest of the team together. I think this will be a pretty interesting and solid team overall. What do you got, Otto?
Before Otto jumps in, I'll just add that Weavile does not actually have Inner Focus, just Sneasel does.
Oh, it's got the... Yeah, sorry, that's my bad.
Go ahead,
Sneasel has Inner Focus, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, I'm dumb, that's why. All right, moving along.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say the same, and I kind of like this team too. Like, the first time I started, I was like, well, this is one of the top 3 teams guaranteed. But then I started analyzing it a little harder, and then I started feeling like there's 2 things that bother me a little bit. One of them is the lack of flying type resists. it's like one of the most important business to have because airstream is a broken move, and here you only have maybe the Shivali to make it like electric or I don't know spot or depending on the type into and circuitry. So it's a little bit tough, in my opinion. And at the same time, the other point is the lack of physical offense here. You only have like the Trevenant and the Weavile, and Blastoise can be physical and go for a shell smash like that. But you also have the Hawlucha, but that's also not hitting very hard unless you get a weak quality like Ryan was saying. That's those are my two biggest critiques of this team. But other than that, I think this team is really good. Like I said, when I saw it for the first time, I was like, wow, this is one of the best teams. But then I started seeing these other little issues.
Yeah, I think we all agree that overall this team is very, very solid at the very least. But moving on to the next team, since this is Otto's team, we'll let Ryan take it, and we will note that it scored a 5.67, which is tied for the team after it. For the tiebreaker, I used number of people that rated it as the top team. That's just sort of arbitrarily what I used as the tiebreaker for this one. But teams 2 through 5 were very close to one another, and 3 and 4 were tied. But Ryan, why don't you break down the team a little bit?
Yeah, I really like Otto's team. This did make my top 5, personally speaking. We got Primarina, Mamoswine, Registeel, Meowstic, Drapion, Entei, Electivire, Executor, Torntea, Decidueye, Charmeleon, and Beware. I just really like, it's kind of in some ways a mid-powered draft, but he got some. The thing is that I see potential for every single mon on this team to come weekly, which is something I can't say about every single team. And not only that, but the roles and the compression of the roles makes a lot of sense to me. Primarina is obviously a really great mon. Even though there was a heated debate over whether it should be tier 1 or not, I do think that Primarina is a pretty fantastic mon to build, especially some special offensive core around. So I think that was actually a pretty great first pick. We got the Mamoswine, which also can output quite a bit of damage, and also is immune to Intimidate. We have Registeel, which, as far as defensive steals go, it's pretty great. I've seen some people have a lot of pretty massive success with Registeel. I've also seen it falter quite a bit. So I'm interested to see the Registeel performance, but I'm pretty confident that Otto will have good use of it. Meowstic is one of the better Prankster mons available. Didn't you use it in VBA, Otto?
Yes, I think you did.
But regardless,
I had it on VBA. Yep.
Yeah. But regardless, Meowstic's mon, I'm sure then they're familiar with. I think it's one of the better Prankster mons that was available. Drapion's kind of a mon that I've never really seen get a ton of usage, but it fills out. It fulfills its role, though, as a poison type. It has pretty good setup opportunity with Sniper. Battle Armor's pretty nice to not get crit. And it's only got one type weakness, which we'll get into in a bit. Entei's fantastic. Entei is, I think, frequently underrated. Having an inner focus mon with the kind of move pool and bulk and support Entei has is really threatening on top of its offensive sets. I have been getting sold on Electivire watching Maxwell use it. I think it's a very solid mon. Torntea to me feels primarily here for Tailwind, but it can also Airstream sweep. I would not sleep on that potential. And I do think that is actually one of the pieces that I liked the most. Seeing the Torntea with a lot of these more mid-speed mons combined with the Prankster support made me feel a lot more comfortable about his ability to maintain speed advantage. The Executor and Decidueye, both are grass types, which I don't know how much I love doubling grass types, but they're both quite good ones, obviously. I think Executor especially has a lot of good draft tech. And Beware is one of both Fluffy and a Nerve are very good draft abilities, which I think is really awesome. Really, my only problem I had with Otto's team, I really only one. I am a little worried about Max Quake into it, actually. You have the Registeel, the Entei, the Electivire, the Drapion, and Charmeleon are all weak to ground moves, and then some of that offense is special. So like if you tech Quake, then that also helps you sort of handle the Primarina as well a little bit. But overall, I mean, you have offense that's really difficult to stop. The special attackers are good. The defensive synergy is there. And I like pretty much every pick. So, Dan, what do you got?
Yeah, I think this is a very solid team. I think he's lucky that he drafted Mamoswine because outside of Mamoswine, every Pokemon on his team is weak to a Mamoswine stab, except for the Beware and the Meowstic. And that's just something interesting that I saw when I was looking through the team. But I think it's really solid. Like, I've played a season with Primarina before. It's a very, very good Pokemon when you can get proper conditions around it, and I think Meowstic and Tornadus give it the opportunity to do that. Entei, I know, is a very solid support option as well as an offensive option, so it can be running in multiple different roles. Sacred Fire is one of the best Fire-type moves in the game. One thing that I am potentially a little nervous about with this team, and my only potential hang-up with it really is that its Trick Room speed tiers seem a little suboptimal. I believe Registeel is 50, Primarina is 60, and you can run items, you can get them lower, but just the base speed tiers to deal with a Trick Room setup is looking a little bit sus in my mind. But other than that, like, awesome team. The pieces seem to fit together really well. It's got good offensive power. It's got good bulk, and its control options with the Tornadus and the Meowstic look like they really work with the rest of the team. But Otto, I'm going to pass it over to you to talk about your own team, since you were one of the 3 red ratings on the side over there.
Yeah. So I'm gonna talk about my team a little more. I'm planning on making a team review video, but basically the reason why I didn't rank myself very high was because I had no plans for this draft, and I usually plan all my synergies beforehand. And this time I couldn't do it. I just had an idea of what I wanted to do. There was basically an idea I had around making a team centered around 2 cores, essentially, one offensive core and one defensive core. That's why that's the best thing I think about this team is that it has a defensive core with just 6 Pokemon that can basically hit everything from super effective damage and stab. So if you take Primarina, Mamoswine, Drapion, Entei, Electivire, and Beware, you can hit everything for super effective, everything on tiers 1 and 2. Tier 3, you have some Sizing Toads and Gastrodons, for example, that those you can hit, but then that's why I added a couple of grass types so I can do damage to those 2 with a 7th mon. And then on the defensive side, you can have a core that can resist everything with just 4 mons, which I think is amazing. Like Primarina, Registeel, Drapion, and Exeggutor can resist any type of attack. And that was basically the idea behind this team, having a team that can resist the most amount of attacks with the least amount of Pokemon, and have a team that can hit every other type or every other strong Pokemon in tiers 1 and 2 with enough 6 mons, essentially. So I don't have to choose between if I'm up against a team that is really well put together and has all the types. With those 6 mons, I can hit everything for stabs. So that was basically the idea. But this idea can do really well or go terribly wrong because I didn't have much in terms of synergies and strategies thought about. So that's why I ranked myself a little lower.
All right, that seems entirely fair. But let's go to the coach that you're tied with, and I'll let you break it down if you want to. I know Matt is your first week opponent, and you guys had exactly the same average rating in power ranking. So I'll let you do this team. You don't need to go too much in depth, and then Ryan and I'll cover it right after you.
Yeah, no, for sure. I really like this team. I'm not happy about facing him week 1, especially because all the discussions in the coach chats made this match a little bit anticipated, to say the least. So it's not great to start a league with a match that is anticipated. It was kind of the same VDL this season. Me and Dan, we had to face off week 1, and it was the VVL champion against the GBA champion. Wasn't great to prep for that, especially because when up against a coach like that, you expect to face them again in playoffs, and then you have to always make a decision very early about should I hide some strategies or not. So that's never great. But this team is amazing. One thing that to me is really, really powerful on this team is just the Italian and Rillaboom picks. Like, I had Italian in my last UGA season. Italian is a really, really solid mon, and it has strategies that with Rillaboom and Rotom can be really, really solid with the scope stuff. Basically you just break any defensive core because you don't have a resist to that to have like Storm Drain. So I think it's a really, really solid team with a lot of strategies. I don't want to talk too much about it just because I played in week 1, but I see this team as one of the best teams in the league.
Yeah, I'll take a couple notes on this team really quick. So Matt did something similar to what you did in the draft in identifying a tier 2 that he thought was under-tiered and building the team around it. In his case, it was Heatran. And he built with Heatran, Togetic, and Rillaboom, which I don't think anyone's ever thought of putting those 3 Pokemon together in that combination.
Never.
Maybe Ryan will be able to correct me about that in a little bit.
Yeah, maybe.
But I think a lot of the Pokemon he has around it make sense because the Aerodactyl's just a fast Tailwind option. The Rotom Fan, I'm a big fan of it. Man, I didn't think that one through. But yes, the Rotom Fan is very good. I think it's basically just discount Zapdos for a much more affordable price. Runerigus is going to be one of the better Trick Room setters. Drampa makes sense as the Trick Room sweeper with it. Overall, the type synergies make a lot of sense. Like, this is just a really good, solid team. It does have some weaknesses. That much is pretty obvious. The damage output is going to be pretty high with 3 of the Pokemon, but outside Heatran, Rillaboom, and Inteleon, the damage isn't great output. And then the Heatran is really a boom-bust Pokemon. Like, it's going to be great in a lot of matchups, but there'll be some where it's almost unbringable because of the quad weaknesses, and it really needs both the Rillaboom and the Togetic when it comes, so that kind of limits your team building potential with the team just a little bit. And that's my one potential hang-up with the team, but overall, I think it's great, except I don't know what Galarian Linoon is doing there. But Ryan, why don't you tell us, wait, have you ever used Heatran, Togetic, and Rillaboom together?
I've used it twice. Well, I used Togekiss instead of Togetic one of those times, but yeah, I've used this core before. I'm very familiar with this team. Matt is stealing from my homework. No, this is a pretty good team. The main actually concern that neither of you have brought up yet is ice types destroy this team.
Yeah.
Like, Togetic is weak to ice. We've got Arrow's weak to ice, Rilla's weak to ice, Rune is weak to ice, Drampa's weak to ice, Drifloon's weak to ice, and Rotom Fan are all weak to ice, which is not great. I mean, I know you have a Celesteela, which, can beat ice types, and you have an Inteleon, which is good. That's a resist, but Inteleon's also made of paper, so it's not really a good defensive switch into a max Hailstorm most of the time. It'll still take, 30 to 40%. That's actually one of my big issues with the team. Just that, like, the problem with the thing that you'll run into with a team like this, because I've run teams like this, is that you really got to pay close attention to your type core matchup very heavily, because these are the kind of teams where you don't want to have a ton of the same type weakness. He did a nice job covering for his ground weakness on the Heatran. Extremely nice job. No one's even mentioned things like Ally Switch Rotom Fan is going to be pretty good for him, potentially. I also really do like the Drifloon here. I've used Drifloon before as a low tier pick. It's pretty good. It'll get Tailwind up for you, especially next to a Rillaboom. And it can proc a Rillaboom weakness policy as well pretty easily, along with having other good utility moves. So it'll get the job done. The main thing is also in terms of offensive stats, I actually do disagree a little bit. I think Aerodactyl has a pretty fantastic damage output, and Drampa is hands down one of the hardest TR hitters in the game, especially when you combo that with Berserk. So I generally do really like this team. I'm worried about ice coverage into it, though. That's really my main critique. Otherwise, I pretty much unilaterally really like this team. It does feel like a pretty much upgraded version of those teams I've run in the past in a lot of respects. So I am excited to see how Matt plays with it, how he handles it. This is definitely a do or die kind of team. You pretty much have to. This is the kind of game you'll know if you're winning or losing a match about 2 to 3 turns into it most of the time when you play with a team like this. It's usually pretty obvious. So best of luck to him.
Yeah, I can agree with that. And Purloin is also really good on this team. All right, and in second place we have Charles, or C-Rad's team. Just a side note for viewers, Otto had to go, so Ryan and I will just be covering these last two by ourselves. So Charles has this Landorus Eye, Tapu Koko, Arcanine, Thievul, Escavalier, Alolan Raichu, Appleton, man, I couldn't remember that thing's name for a sec, Jellicent, Lycanroc, Mienfoo, and Volibee. So, I'm just going to ignore the Mienfoo and Volibee for the most part. Like, I know they do things, but I want to look at the first 9 things on his team. This team has a lot of steamroll potential, and I think it's very good. I may be biased because I've won a league with Tapu Koko and Thievul before, but I just know how well they work together and how well they can steamroll a team, even one that's trying to prep for them, because they have just such great set variety. And I think the Landorus as an offensive option and the Raichu really complement them really well. And his Trick Room mode is also very threatening. Escav is a powerful Trick Room option. Appleton is a powerful Trick Room option. Lycanroc is a great cleanup option with Accelerock. The one thing on this team that I'm a little hesitant about is actually the Arcanine, which, don't get me wrong, Arcanine is a fantastic Pokemon. But this team is designed for offense. It's designed to end games in 4 or 5 turns. And Arcanine just doesn't fit that style as much with 110 attack and 100 special attack. So that's my one potential holdup, is that Arcanine will force this team to play in ways that's not necessarily comfortable with. Like, yes, you can try and bulk something out with a fast mode if you're going to go with, like, Screens, Koko, and Arcanine, and then you're maxing Landorus, which doesn't really want to max, or you're using Lycanroc in a way that suggests that it isn't made out of paper, which isn't really true. So I don't know, it just feels like Arcanine wants to play a different game than the rest of the team, and I also understand Mienfoo and Volibee, fake out coaching support and Tailwind, but again, those are also options that work pretty much on a hyper-offensive team. So that is my one potential hang-up with this team, is that Arcanine could be something that better fits the archetype. It does give him some flexibility, but I don't think the modes that he can flex into with the Arcanine are going to be as good as his steamroll potential is with that sort of Koko, Landorus, Thievul mode. But why don't you tell me what you think about Charles's team?
I really like it. I rated this team pretty highly. One thing I will note, especially for Charles, as someone else who has been here before, enjoy your second place in PRs with absolutely no first place overall rankings. I have been there before. It is always a weird place to be at. If I do want to, we'll talk about it at the end, but the averages this go around were pretty bananas. So yeah, I really do like this team a lot. I think it's got a lot of just really good blitz potential. I like the fast mode. I like the slow mode. My one critique of it is something like a Mamoswine looks a little threatening. Ground ice coverage is really good into a lot of this team, potentially, which is something I'm slightly concerned about. You got a 4x weakness with the Lando. You've got another 4x weakness with the Appleton on the ice side. Volibee, I actually think Volibee is going to come a fair bit, honestly, is one. So I actually think the Arcanine is there to kind of give some defensive support for some of those ice weak mons. But then we also have some ground weak mons, notably the Koko, Raichu, Arcanine, which I think those 3 mons would come pretty frequently. But other than that, I mean, I really don't have anything I'm particularly worried about with this team. It's got just really incredible output. Escavalier, Jellicent, Appleton is a surprisingly strong, TR core. I think that Raichu, both as a supporting piece and a sweeper in its own right, can do pretty well, but I do think the bread and butter of this team is the Koko Thievul. It has a little bit of what we were talking about with Snoot, where I feel like a lot of the best things this team can do do center around Coco. Like, if he wants to get Trick Room up, I imagine most of the time he'll run like a more supportive Coco to like set screens or click Nature's Madness or whatever, so that the Jellicent can live long enough to get the Trick Room up. I also think that a lot of the offensive modes are facilitated pretty heavily by that Coco. So I do think that it might be a pretty centralized mon on this comp potentially, but I don't think it's as centralized as Snoot's team, even though I think there are pros and cons to that sort of a thing. But yeah, no, just in terms of this team, generally speaking, got pretty solid rankings all around. It did not ever clinch a number 1 spot, but it was so consistently high and fit the draft styles and things of our coaches so well that it ended up here in 2nd place. So congrats to C-Rad.
Yep, and then we are going to move on to Ryan's least favorite part of every PR video, and that's his breakdown of why my team is rated number 1.
Yeah, I actually did not rate your team number 1. Anyway, I do like your team a lot, though. So we got Torn Metagross, which is dumb. Sylveon, Persian, Wishy-Washy, Virizion, Heatmore, Reuniclus, Dragalge, and Vikavolt. So this team is pretty interesting. Torn does a lot for this team. Torn is like kind of one of the most important Pokemon on it. Being able to set Tailwind for mons like Sylveon and Vikavolt is huge. Those are mons that suffer from kind of mid, and also obviously the Metagross too. But those 3 mons all suffer a little bit from having kind of middling base speeds, and then they all suddenly outspeed base 130s. And you're talking about Pixelate Mon and also something with 145 special attack with Levitate that also helps the Metagross out. The Trick Room mode is also solid. Obviously, I mentioned the Vikavolt here, but Dragalge is a very good Trick Room option. Sylveon can also run itself in Trick Room, and Wishy-Washy is actually a relatively big threat until you can get enough chip damage on it. Virizion is definitely the most polarizing pick on this list. The Virizion has a 4x flying weakness, and it has kind of not great offensive stats, but as a coaching mon, it's pretty good, and it can justify boost with Persian, which is something you have to prep for. You could also like literally just brutal swing with Torn on into it as well and just get +1 and try to do stuff. That would probably be fine. Heatmore has White Smoke, and it's a pretty solid fire type, and it's Goomer's favorite Pokemon apparently. Reuniclus is a solid TR setter, and it is a potential sweeper in its own right, but I've found that typically you want it to run a little bit not as your primary sweeper. I imagine the Vikavolt and Dragalge will be doing more of that. This team the thing with this team is the modes are very defined. Like, it's the modes are not things that people haven't seen before in draft, but they are things that are hard to stop in draft. It is very difficult to stop a Tornadus from doing what it wants. Metagross can auto sweep teams. You have a potential coaching option. Your Trick Room mode looks really threatening. Your Tailwind, if it's able to stay up or not be matched, your back options look really strong into most teams. I think that there's nice synergy between these between this comp. And you've got most of the primary type cores covered and whatever else. I think it's very good. I do really like this team. I do think it is funny, though. There's only 1 rating for you, so it is kind of funny that I think our top 2 ended up not getting... There wasn't really a huge consensus majority, is what I'm getting at. Like, your team got a lot of, 2nd and 3rd places, which put it at number 1 in the averages, but you weren't a lot of people's favorite team, which I think is interesting. But yeah, overall, this is just a very solid... commanding sort of draft. I do think it's linear in that whatever you lead or whatever you do, people will know what you're going for, but I do think it's incredibly hard to stop whatever you're going for, which is why it was rated so highly.
Yeah, I can agree with a lot of that, and I do want to talk a little bit about the averages as well. My average was 4.6, which is the lowest average I've ever seen for a top-rated team. So there was a lot of centralized ideas about this team, about the draft. I think every team in the top 5 was rated above a 6.0 and below a 4.5. So There are a lot of teams that are rated really close to one another, and I think the reason my team ended up being number 1 is because my outliers weren't as much or as low as a lot of other things, and I was a pretty consistent top 5 picks on a lot of rankings. So it's not that the team is just overwhelmingly better than all the other teams, it's that it's the team that's easiest to recognize as like, oh yeah, everything on that team is, pretty good.
It makes sense.
It makes sense. It's all pretty good, which is why I think I finished number 1 in these power rankings. But speaking of the power rankings, we have our final power rankings that will go me, then Charles, Matt, Otto, Snoot, El Flamingo, Izzy Max, Ryan, Tay, Sakimoto, Guest Knight Rider, Goomer, Dina, Gumi, not Solanor, and Cortex. Ryan, do you have any final thoughts on these final power rankings to close us out?
Yeah, these were fun to do. Obviously, we're dealing with coaches from a lot of different leagues, and obviously opinions were, to say extremely split among our coaches was not an understatement. I do hope we did as good of a job of explaining potential highs and lows on different ranking lists as best we could. Definitely there is just a lot, where we have a whole lot of different draft styles, a whole lot of different types of players, and a whole lot of top players. I mean, these teams are all so good. I mean, even a lot of the low-ranked teams, I would have put very high, easy top 5 in most other PRs that I've done. And it ended up being very difficult for me personally to rank my own list, and I hope it was difficult for most of our coaches to think of their own power rankings and their own 1 through 16s. And, I think that as the averages as they played out, it largely made a lot of sense to me as to why some teams were polarizing, why some weren't, and kind of how things ended up playing out. I wish all of our coaches the best of luck. We have some just absolutely incredible players here, and I really hope that everyone just has some fun with these PRs, and we see how the season plays out.
Yep, thank you guys all so much for watching. We'll be getting out a lot more PDPL content over the coming weeks leading up to and of course through the season. So on behalf of Otto and Ryan, this has been Dan. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time. Bye.